Someone said something to you recently, and it's still living in your head rent-free. Maybe it was a comment, a dismissal, an insult wrapped in a compliment. Maybe it was the way someone ignored you, the silence that somehow said everything. Maybe it was a person who keeps doing the same infuriating thing over and over again, like they're testing exactly how much you can take. And the part that bothers you most, it's not even what they said or did. It's that they got to you, that you gave them that kind of power, that hours, maybe days come after it happened, you're still replaying it, still composing the perfect response you never said, still feeling the heat of it in your chest. What if I told you there was a way to make that stop? Not through suppression, not through distance, not through pretending you don't care, but through a complete and permanent shift in how you understand what other people can actually do to you. That shift exists. It was discovered by a man who had every reason in the world to be consumed by rage, and chose something else entirely. And once you see what he saw, you will never experience anger the same way again. Let's talk about what anger actually costs you. Not in the big obvious ways, not the relationships it damages or the words it produces that can't be taken back. Those are real. But there's a cost that goes deeper than any of that. Every time you get angry, every time someone gets under your skin and stays there, you hand them something extraordinarily precious. Something you can never get back once it's gone. You hand them your peace, your clarity, your focus, your capacity to think well, to act intentionally and move through the world as the person you've decided to be. All of it surrendered to someone who probably isn't thinking about you at all. There's a particular kind of person who loses the most to anger. And it's not the impulsive person. It's not the hot-headed person. It's the thoughtful person, the person who cares deeply, who has standards, who built a picture of how things should be, how people should behave, how conversations should go, how the world should work, and feels genuine pain every time reality refuses to match it. If that's you, and I think it might be, then what I'm about to say matters more than you realize. Because here's the hidden problem. You don't have an anger problem. You have an expectations problem. You have a meaning-making problem. And you have a problem with the invisible story you tell yourself every time someone behaves in a way that disappoints you. And until you address the story, not the trigger, not the person, not the situation, the anger will keep coming. Different triggers, same fire. There was a philosopher who understood this with such precision, such depth, that his framework for managing anger is still being used 2,000 years later by everyone from Navy SEALs to trauma surgeons to elite athletes navigating the most high-pressure environments in the world. His name was Seneca, and his understanding of anger will permanently change yours. Picture Rome at its most corrupt. An emperor on the throne who is brilliant, charming, and increasingly horrifyingly unhinged. A man capable of executing his own family members on a whim. A man who had already killed his own mother. A man whose moods shift like weather, clear sky to catastrophic storm, with no warning and no logic. Now imagine being that emperor's closest advisor. That was Seneca's life. For years, Seneca, philosopher, playwright, one of the greatest minds of the ancient world, served as chief advisor to Nero. He walked the most dangerous tightrope in the known world every single day. One wrong word, one perceived slight, one moment of disfavor, and everything ended. Exile, execution, disappearance. And yet, by all accounts, Seneca maintained an almost uncanny inner stillness. He wrote prolifically. He thought clearly. He produced some of the most profound philosophical work in history, while working within an arm's reach of one of history's most terrifying human beings. How? Not by being cold, not by being indifferent, not by suppressing what he felt, but by understanding something about anger, about where it comes from, what it is, and what it actually means, that most people never discover. He wrote about it in a work called De Ira, on anger, 3 books, the most comprehensive philosophical study of anger ever written. And at its heart was a single insight that will reframe everything you think you know about why people make you angry. Seneca said, anger is the desire to repay suffering with suffering. Read that again slowly, not a reflex, not a feeling, a desire, a wish, a request your mind makes automatically, instantly below the level of conscious thought, that the person who caused you pain should experience pain in return. And the moment you see it that way, as a desire, you are not a force of nature, everything changes. Because desires can be examined, desires can be questioned, desires can be denied. And that's just the beginning. Seneca's philosophy of anger rests on 4 pillars. Each one by itself is powerful. Together they form a complete architecture for a life that nothing and no one can disturb. Pillar 1. Anger is always a choice, even when it doesn't feel like one. This is the most uncomfortable thing Seneca says, and the most liberating. He argued that anger is not something that happens to you. It is something you produce through a sequence of mental events so fast that they feel automatic. But automatic is not the same as involuntary. Here's the sequence he mapped. Something happens. Your senses register it. Before your rational mind engages, your body produces an initial physical reaction. A spike, a jolt, a flush of heat. That's not anger. That's biology. You can't control that. Seneca was clear. That initial physical reflex is not a moral failure and not your responsibility. But then, and this is everything, comes the moment of assent. The moment where your mind, consciously or unconsciously, says yes to the anger. Decides that this event warrants rage. Decides that this person has genuinely injured you. Decides that you are owed something and that the appropriate response is fury. That moment of assent is a choice. It happens in milliseconds. But it is a choice. And it can be interrupted. The space between stimulus and assent. That is where your freedom lives. That is where you are either sovereign over yourself or you are not. And Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not suppression, not avoidance, delay. The time between what happens and what you decide it means. That time, even if it's 3 seconds, is enough for reason to enter. And once reason enters, the anger almost always dissolves. Because anger requires a specific story about what just happened, and reason tells a different story." Pillar 2. The people who anger you are not your enemies. They are your teachers. This is the insight that sounds the most like a bumper sticker and cuts the deepest when you actually sit with it. Seneca asks, when you get angry at someone for lying to you, for being petty, for being selfish, for being inconsistent, what did you actually expect? He asks this not to be dismissive, but to expose the hidden assumption underneath every episode of anger. And we get angry because we expected something different. We expected fairness from someone who has never been particularly fair. We expected honesty from someone who has always been self-serving. We expected maturity from someone who has always been reactive. We built a model of how this person should behave, based not on who they actually are, but on who we wanted them to be, and then felt betrayed when reality showed up. Seneca's answer is not to lower your standards. It is to see clearly, to understand that human beings, all of them, including you, are works in progress, shaped by forces they often don't understand, acting out patterns they didn't choose, making mistakes with more consistency than wisdom. He wrote, "Let us be more gentle and kind. Yet let us remember that we are looking at ourselves. When someone behaves badly, when they lie, when they are cruel, when they are small, when that is who they are right now. not who they must always be, but who they are right now. And your anger changes nothing about that. Your anger does not make them better. It does not make you better. It does not improve the situation in any way. It only costs you. The teacher question is this: what does this person's behavior reveal about what I still expect that I shouldn't? Because wherever you find anger, you will always find an unexamined expectation. And unexamined expectations are the source of more suffering than any human being has ever inflicted on another. Pillar 3. You cannot be harmed without your permission. This is the most radical claim in all of Stoic philosophy. And Seneca states it plainly, repeatedly, without apology. He distinguishes between two kinds of harm: injury, actual damage done to your body, your property, your circumstances, and insult, the attempt to damage your dignity, your worth, your sense of self. Injury is real. If someone breaks your arm is broken. Seneca would not tell you to simply accept that. But insult only succeeds if you allow it to. Think about it. When someone calls you stupid, does that make you stupid? When someone says you'll never succeed, does that make it true? When someone dismisses you, mocks you, belittles you in front of others, what exactly have they actually done to you? They have produced sounds. They have projected their internal world, their insecurities, their fears, their need to diminish outward. And those projections land only if you stand in front of them and let them in. Seneca wrote that the person who cannot be insulted, who receives contempt with equanimity, is not invulnerable. They are invincible, because they have closed the door through which all the petty, gratuitous cruelty of other people enters. This is not about pretending you don't feel anything. It's about understanding that your worth is not decided in other people's mouths, that the size of your dignity is not determined by the people who try to shrink it, that you are not a mirror that simply reflects whatever people throw at you, unless you decide to be. Pillar 4. The cure for anger is perspective. Radical, uncomfortable, total perspective. Seneca had a practice. When someone angered him, when a political rival acted badly, when a student disappointed him, when someone in power treated him unjustly, he would ask himself a single question before responding. In 10 years, will this matter? Not to diminish the present, not to bypass what's real, but to locate the thing in its actual scale. Because almost nothing that makes you angry today will be relevant to your life in 10 years. Most of it won't matter in 10 months. A great deal of it won't matter in 10 days. He writes about the smallness of the things that provoke us. A bad dinner, a rude comment, a colleague who takes credit, a friend who cancels plans, a stranger who cuts you off in traffic, against the backdrop of an entire human life, against the backdrop of everything you have and everything you're building and everything you still want to do and become. These things are so small as to be almost invisible, and yet we give them hours of our attention, days of our energy, years cumulatively of our peace. Seneca's radical perspective was not merely philosophical, it was practical. It was the habit of constantly resizing the provocation against the actual scale of the life you're living, and discovering almost every time that the thing that angered you was never worth the cost of the anger. So how do you actually build this? How do you go from someone who still carries conversations in their chest for days to someone who processes, releases, and moves on without giving another person's behavior the power to define your day? Lesson 1. Name the story before you react. The moment you feel the spike of anger, stop. Not to suppress, to observe, and ask one question. What story am I telling about what just happened? Because the anger is never about the event. It's about the story your mind places over the event in real time. They didn't respond to your message, and the story is, They don't respect me. Your idea was ignored in the meeting, and the story is I don't matter here. Someone was unkind, and the story is I am being attacked. The event and the story are not the same thing. When you name the story, or when you hold it up and look at it clearly, you discover that it's a construction, not a fact. A choice your mind made in a fraction of a second, based on past experience, existing wounds, and habitual interpretation. You can choose a different story, not a naive one, not one that ignores what happened, but one that doesn't automatically assign the worst meaning to the most painful interpretation. They didn't respond might mean they're overwhelmed. The idea was ignored might mean the timing was wrong, not the idea. The unkindness might say everything about where they are right now, and nothing permanent about where you stand. Name the story, then decide if it's the only possible story. Lesson 2. Make anger expensive to maintain. Seneca prescribed a nightly accounting, not in a punishing way, in an analytical one. At the end of each day, he would review his emotional responses. Where had he given into irritation? What had triggered it? What did that reaction cost him? And the purpose was not guilt. The purpose was data. Because when you begin to honestly track what your anger costs you, the energy spent, the focus lost, the quality of your thinking degraded, the way your body carries it, the time that evaporates while you replay conversations, you begin to experience anger not as righteous or satisfying, but as expensive. And expensive habits, once you see their price tag clearly, become easier to put down. Try it tonight. Before you sleep, ask, where did I give someone else my peace today? What did that cost me? Was the cost worth what I got in return? Almost never is. Lesson 3. Premeditate the difficult people. Marcus Aurelius, who studied Seneca deeply, had a morning practice that is perhaps the most underrated tool in the entire Stoic toolkit, and he would begin each day by saying to himself, "Today I will encounter people who are rude, ungrateful, deceptive, and petty. They will behave this way because they are still learning, and I will meet them with patience. Not because their behavior is acceptable, but because losing my peace over it serves no one." This is not cynicism, this is preparation. When you expect difficulty when you anticipate that traffic will be slow, that the meeting will be frustrating, that someone will say the careless thing, you stop being blindsided. And when you stop being blindsided, you stop reacting. Because the reaction is almost always the product of surprise, of the gap between what you expected and what arrived. Close that gap in the morning. Expect the full range of human behavior, and approach the day as someone who has already made peace with the fact that people will be people. Difficult, inconsistent, sometimes cruel, always imperfect. Lesson 4. Separate the action from the actor. This is one of Seneca's most nuanced tools, and the hardest to genuinely practice. He asks us to distinguish between what someone did and who someone is, between a behavior and a character, between a moment and a pattern. Because when we're angry, we collapse these completely. Someone does one thing badly, and we indict the whole person. Someone makes one selfish choice, and we decide they are fundamentally selfish. Someone hurts us once, and we relate to them forever as someone who hurts. This collapse is always unfair. It's unfair to them, because it denies the possibility of growth, of context, of complexity. And it's unfair to you, and because it locks you into a version of the relationship that has no room to evolve. Practice the separation. They did this, not they are this. What happened is real. The permanent verdict your anger wants to issue is not. Lesson 5. Channel the energy, don't destroy it. Seneca never said anger has no energy. He understood that the heat of injustice, the fire of being genuinely wronged, the intensity of caring deeply about something, all of that is fuel. The problem is not the energy, the problem is where it goes. Unprocessed anger becomes resentment, a slow poison that damages you far more than the person you resent. It becomes bitterness. It becomes the story of your life that revolves around what was done to you rather than what you chose to do with it. But processed anger, anger that has been felt, I examined and then redirected, becomes something extraordinary. It becomes drive, clarity, the energy to build something, change something, refuse to accept something. The question is never, should I feel this? The question is, what will I do with it? Lesson 6. Ask what this person needs, not what they deserve. This is the hardest lesson, and the most transformative. Seneca was deeply influenced by the idea that difficult people are almost always suffering people, that the cruelty, the pettiness, the provocation, these are not strengths, they are symptoms. Symptoms of fear, of inadequacy, of pain that has no other exit. This doesn't excuse the behavior, it explains it. And explanation changes everything. Not because it makes the behavior acceptable, but because it makes your response to it come from a different place, from understanding rather than reaction, from clarity rather than heat. The next time someone tries to provoke you, tries to diminish you, tries to make you small, ask quietly in the privacy of your own mind, what must be happening inside this person for them to need to do this? You won't always find compassion, but you will almost always find distance from the anger, and distance is enough. Here is what happens to a person who genuinely absorbs and lives this philosophy. They become uncontrollable, not in the chaotic sense, in the deepest possible sense. No one can control their emotional state without their consent. No one can make them small. No one can make them reactive. No one can use their own emotions as a weapon against them. And this is what genuine power actually looks like. Not the power to dominate others, even the power to remain yourself, clear, grounded, purposeful, regardless of what anyone around you is doing. Think about the people in your life who embody this. The ones who never seem rattled, who can be in the middle of conflict and still think clearly, who can receive criticism without collapsing or attacking, who can be disappointed without being destroyed. Those people are not lucky. They are not naturally more thick-skinned. They have built something deliberately through practice, through philosophy that most people never build because most people never understand that it's available. It was available to Seneca in the court of Nero. It was available to Marcus Aurelius managing an empire in crisis. It was available to Epictetus in literal chains. And it is available to you in traffic, in difficult conversations, in relationships that test you, in workplaces that frustrate you, in a world that will never ever behave the way you think it should. Seneca eventually fell out of favor with Nero completely. The emperor he had served and guided and protected, to whatever extent that was possible, ordered his execution. And Seneca, according to accounts from those who were present, met his death with the same stillness he had practiced every day of his philosophical life. Not because he didn't feel anything, but because he had long since decided that his peace was not something that could be taken from him by any external event, including the last one. That is the end point of this philosophy. Not indifference, sovereignty. The people who make you angry are not your problem. They never were. Yet your problem has always been the story you tell when someone behaves badly. The expectation you built that reality refused to honor. The permission you gave and automatically, unconsciously out of habit, for someone else's behavior to decide the quality of your interior life. Seneca lived in conditions that would have broken almost anyone. He survived them not by being harder, colder, or more detached, but by being clearer, by understanding at a level that most people never reach, that his peace was an inside job, that no one on earth had the power to take it from him unless he handed it over. What he built, you can build. Not overnight, not perfectly, not without falling back into old patterns, replaying conversations, carrying heat in your chest, letting someone live in your head for days without paying rent. But one choice at a time, one delayed reaction, one story examined before it becomes a verdict, one person met with understanding instead of indignation. Until one day, without ceremony, without announcement, you realize that the things that used to ruin your week now barely touch your afternoon. That is freedom, ancient, hard-won, available to you, and nobody can take it away. If something in this video stayed with you, if there's one idea you're going to carry into tomorrow, I want you to test it, just once. Find the person or situation that usually gets to you, and try one thing differently. Name the story, delay the ascent, ask what they need instead of what they deserve. See what happens, and subscribe to this channel then, because this is what we do here every single week. We take the most tested, the most rigorously proven wisdom in human history, and translate it into something you can actually live. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who is still carrying something they should have put down a long time ago. The next video goes even deeper, and you'll want to be here for it.